Two men started working in the same month. September 1998. Both were 24 years old. Both landed entry-level jobs in the same mid-sized American city, one in marketing, one in logistics. Both started at $34,000. Over the next 26 years, both received regular raises, changed jobs a few times, and ended up in their early 50s earning between $95,000 and $105,000. Their income trajectories were nearly identical. Their wealth trajectories were not. In September 2024, the man in marketing had a net worth of $1,140,000. His house had $280,000 in equity. His investment accounts held $710,000. He had $150,000 in other assets and no consumer debt. The man in logistics had a net worth of $187,000. Most of it was home equity. His investment accounts held $62,000. He had $34,000 in consumer debt and $41,000 remaining on a car loan from 2022. Same city, same era, same income arc. The gap between them, $953,000, was not produced by a single dramatic decision. It was not produced by one good investment or one bad one inheritance or one windfall, one period of discipline or one period of recklessness. It was produced by the aggregate effect of dozens of small, individually invisible behavioral differences, compounding over 26 years, in a way that neither man could fully perceive while it was happening. The man in marketing did not feel wealthy for most of those 26 years. He drove ordinary cars. He lived in a house that was smaller than his income implied he should own. He declined things. He automated things. He made decisions that felt like small sacrifices and were actually the construction of something neither visible nor exciting until, at 50, the number on his statement crossed a threshold that changed the available options in the remaining decades of his life. The man in logistics did not feel irresponsible for most of those 26 years. His house was nice. His cars were current. His vacations were real. He looked, by every external measure, more financially comfortable than his counterpart. And he was, in the present tense, in each individual year. The cost of that present tense comfort, compounded over 26 years, was $953,000 in absent future security. Today I am going to show you not just what separated these two men, but the specific mechanism, the single underlying behavioral pattern that explains why most people never reach $1 million regardless of income, and what that pattern looks like from inside the financial life of someone living it. The $1 million net worth threshold is not an arbitrary finish line. It is the point at which a household's accumulated assets begin to generate enough passive income, at a sustainable 3.5% to 4% withdrawal rate, to provide a meaningful supplement to Social Security that covers a significant portion of essential living expenses without employment income. Below $1 million, retirement security requires either continued income, significant lifestyle reduction, or both. At $1 million and above, the options genuinely expand. The threshold matters because of what it unlocks, not because of what it signals. And yet, according to the Federal Reserve's 2023 survey of consumer finances, only 12.9% of American households have a net worth of $1 million or more. For working-class and middle-income households, those earning between $50,000 and $150,000, the segment most likely to be watching this, the figure is lower. Fidelity's 2024 Millionaire Outlook study found that among households earning under $150,000 annually, 8.3% have reached $1 million in net worth. 91.7% have not. The median net worth for Americans at peak earning age, 55 to 64, is $364,270, according to the same Federal Reserve survey. The mean is $1,794,600, inflated by concentration at the top. The median near retiree has $364,270. At a 3.5% withdrawal rate, that produces $12,749 per year, $1,062 per month. Combined with the average Social Security benefit of $1,907, The median household approaching retirement has $2,969 per month to fund a life that the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2023 Consumer Expenditure Survey says costs $4,345 per month for Americans 65 and older. The monthly shortfall is $1,376. For the median American, every month of retirement costs $1,376 more than their assets and Social Security can cover. The $1 million threshold is not a vanity target. It is approximately the net worth at which the monthly shortfall closes, depending on the household's Social Security benefit and cost of living. It is the number that separates the retirement where options exist from the retirement where calculations are constant. And 91.7% of middle-income households will not reach it. This is not your fault. The financial behaviors that produce $1 million on a middle-income salary over a working lifetime are learnable, executable, and available to anyone in that income range. They are simply never taught as a coherent system. They are scattered across financial media as individual tips, disconnected from each other, disconnected from the compounding math that makes their sequence non-negotiable, and consistently presented as optional upgrades rather than as the non-negotiable structural behaviors that the data shows they actually are. The system was designed to sell you financial products. It was not designed to make you a millionaire. The single underlying pattern that explains why most people never reach $1 million is not a spending problem. It is not an income problem. It is not a knowledge problem. It is a sequence problem. The behaviors that build $1 million are mostly known. The order in which they must operate, and the specific points in time when each one must be locked in to allow compounding to do the work, is almost never communicated. The sequence has 3 phases, and each phase has a threshold. The threshold must be crossed in order. Crossing them out of order produces a result that looks like progress and is not. Phase 1 is protection. Phase 2 is accumulation. Phase 3 is acceleration. Most people spend their entire working lives in Phase 2 without ever completing Phase 1, which means Phase 3 never arrives, or arrives too late, with too small a base, for the compounding engine to produce 7 figures on a middle-income timeline. The man in marketing completed Phase 1 at 29. The man in logistics never completed it. That single timing difference, compounded over the subsequent 21 years, accounts for the majority of the $953,000 gap. Phase 1 is protection, and it has 2 components that must both be in place simultaneously before Phase 2 can run without being repeatedly interrupted. The first component is a fully funded emergency reserve, not the $1,000 starter fund, not a partial buffer, but a complete 4 to 5 month essential expense reserve held in a high-yield account at a separate institution. As established in prior frameworks, the emergency fund is not a conservative alternative to investing. It is the structural prerequisite that allows investing to run continuously without forced liquidation. An investment account that gets partially drained every 18 to 24 months by an underfunded emergency reserve does not compound. It cycles, up during accumulation periods, back during disruptions, ending each cycle marginally ahead but never building the sustained base that the compounding math requires. The second component is the elimination of all consumer debt above 8% interest. Not reduction. Elimination. A household running a $4,000 credit card balance at 22% APR simultaneously with a retirement account contributing at 7% annual returns is running a guaranteed 22% loss on $4,000 while booking a probabilistic 7% gain on the retirement balance. The net position is negative 15 percentage points on $4,000 every year, for as long as both run simultaneously. The retirement account can grow by 7%. The credit card balance grows by 22% if only minimums are paid. The household's net wealth position deteriorates despite the retirement contribution, because the drag of the high-interest debt exceeds the gain of the investment. Phase 1 protection means both components are in place. The emergency reserve is complete, and consumer debt above 8% is eliminated. Until both are true, every dollar invested in a retirement or brokerage account is at risk of being partially liquidated or offset by high-interest debt growth. The investment is not building wealth cleanly. It is building wealth against headwinds that cost more than the investment returns. The man in logistics crossed phase 1 partially. He eliminated his credit card debt in his early 30s, once, but carried it again by 37, again by 42, and has carried it continuously since 44. His emergency fund was built to $8,000 in 2011 and was never grown beyond that level despite a housing cost structure that by 2018 made $8,000 an insufficient reserve by a significant margin. Phase 1 was never truly complete because neither component was permanently maintained. Each incomplete component created an interruption to Phase 2, a liquidation, a debt cycle, a reduced contribution period, that reset the compounding clock on a portion of his accumulated balance. Between ages 35 and 50, the man in logistics experienced 4 periods of reduced or suspended 401k contributions above the minimum match capture, totaling approximately 38 months of interrupted accumulation. The Vanguard research established in prior frameworks shows that investors who paused contributions during market corrections had portfolios 11.3% smaller at the 5-year mark than investors who maintained contributions. Multiply that effect across 4 interruption periods over 15 years, and the compounding damage is not additive. It is multiplicative. Each interruption resets the base from which the subsequent accumulation compounds. The base never gets large enough to generate the self-sustaining returns that mark the transition to Phase 3. Phase 2 is accumulation, and it has one governing principle that tolerates no exceptions. The investment contribution is the first allocation from income, automated, and sized to generate $100,000 in investable assets within 7 years of Phase 1 completion. The 7-year target is not arbitrary. As established in the first $100,000 framework, at $100,000 the portfolio generates approximately $7,000 per year in compounding returns at 7%, enough to match and then exceed the contribution rate for a median earner. The compounding engine has started. Before $100,000, the investor is the engine. After $100,000, the portfolio increasingly powers itself. The 7-year timeline, for someone earning $65,000 to $95,000, requires a contribution rate of approximately 15% to 18% of gross income depending on starting balance and market returns. That contribution rate, maintained without interruption from Phase 1 completion, generates the $100,000 threshold and starts the engine. The man in marketing hit $100,000 in investable assets at 33. He had completed Phase 1 at 29, cleared his modest student debt, built his emergency reserve to $14,400, and then directed every available dollar, every raise protocol execution, every contribution increase, to the accumulation goal. His contribution rate between 29 and 33 averaged 19% of gross income. It was not comfortable. He drove the same car for 7 years. He did not upgrade his apartment when his income crossed $55,000. He declined the kitchen renovation his wife wanted until the $100,000 was crossed. The man in logistics hit his first $100,000 in investable assets at 42, 9 years later than his counterpart, despite nearly identical income. Phase 1 was never complete. The accumulation phase was interrupted 4 times, and the contribution rate never reached the threshold that generates the 7-year timeline because the emergency fund draws and the debt cycles consumed the capital that should have been building the base. The 9-year difference in reaching $100,000 is the mathematical source of most of the $953,000 gap. The marketing manager's $100,000 at 33 had 17 years to compound to age 50 before the comparison point. At 7% annual return, $100,000 compounds to approximately $320,000 over 17 years. The logistics manager's $100,000 at 42 had 8 years to age 50. The same $100,000 compounds to approximately $172,000 over 8 years. The difference is $148,000 from the same $100,000 just from reaching it 9 years earlier. That $148,000 differential, compounded on top of the additional contributions the marketing manager made during those 9 extra years of clean accumulation, explains the majority of the total gap. This is the hidden math of the $1 million target. It is not built in the late years of a career, when income is highest and the effort feels most deliberate. It is built in the early years of accumulation, when the base is small and the compounding math is most sensitive to interruption and delay. The 9 years between 29 and 38 are worth more to a final balance at 65 than the 9 years between 50 and 59, not because effort or income is different, but because compounding time is the input that cannot be recovered once it is spent. Phase 3 is acceleration, and it arrives automatically when the portfolio reaches a self-sustaining scale, typically between $300,000 and $500,000, when the annual compounding returns exceed the annual contribution. At that point, the investor's primary job shifts from building the base to not disrupting the engine. The man in marketing entered Phase 3 at approximately 44, when his portfolio crossed $380,000 and his annual compounding gains at 7% reached $26,600, exceeding his annual contribution of $22,800. From that point, the portfolio would have grown to approximately $780,000 by age 50 even if he had stopped contributing entirely, purely from compounding on the existing base. He did not stop contributing. His contributions layered on top of the self-sustaining compounding. The $1,140,000 at 50 was the result. The man in logistics entered Phase 3 never, or has not yet entered it at 50, with $62,000 in investable assets. His annual compounding at 7% on $62,000 is $4,340. His annual contribution is approximately $8,200. The portfolio is still in early accumulation phase. At his current trajectory, assuming no further interruptions and consistent contributions, he reaches $100,000 in investable assets at approximately 53, the point at which the marketing manager's portfolio had already been self-sustaining for 9 years. The Phase 3 transition, if it arrives, will arrive at 57 or 58 for the logistics manager. That leaves 7 to 8 years of Phase 3 compounding before traditional retirement age, generating a final balance in the range of $300,000 to $400,000 rather than the $1.1 million that 21 years of Phase 3 produced. The gap is not recoverable through income alone. A promotion, a side income, a market run, these help. But the primary variable in the gap is not income. It is time in Phase 3, which is determined by when Phase 1 was completed and Phase 2 ran without interruption. The logistics manager needed to complete Phase 1 at 29, the same year his counterpart did. He needed to reach $100,000 by 36 rather than 42. The income to do both was available. The sequence was not followed. The compounding clock ran on a smaller base for 21 years, and the arithmetic of exponential growth does not forgive the lost years at the beginning. The implementation is straightforward for anyone who can identify which phase they are currently in. If you are between 28 and 38 and have not yet completed Phase 1, if your emergency fund is below 4 months of essential expenses, if you carry consumer debt above 8%, Phase 1 completion is the only financial priority above your employer match. Every dollar above the match threshold goes to Phase 1 completion. The timeline for completion should be aggressive, 12 to 18 months maximum. Every month Phase 1 is incomplete is a month that Phase 2 is running with interruption risk, and interruption risk at this stage costs more in compounding than the interest on the debt or the shortfall in the emergency fund. The urgency is real and it is mathematical, not motivational. If you are between 35 and 45 and have completed Phase 1 but have not yet reached $100,000 in investable assets, the 7-year accumulation clock is running. The contribution rate required to reach $100,000 within the remaining years of that window, from your current balance, is calculable at investor.gov in under 10 minutes. Calculate it. Set it. Automate it. Do not negotiate with the number. The number is what the math requires. If you are between 40 and 50 and have crossed $100,000 in investable assets with Phase 1 complete, you are in Phase 2 approaching the Phase 3 threshold. The primary job is to not interrupt the engine. Do not reduce contributions during market corrections. Do not liquidate during disruptions. The emergency fund exists precisely to prevent this. Do not allow lifestyle inflation to consume the raise protocol executions that are layering contributions onto a base that is beginning to compound at a meaningful rate. The engine is running. The job is maintenance, not construction. The 48-hour action. Calculate your current net worth. Total investable assets, retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, HSA, minus total consumer debt above 8%. This is your phase-adjusted wealth position. If the number is below 0, you are in phase 1 regardless of what your gross investment balances show. If the number is between 0 and $100,000, you are in early phase 2. If it is above $100,000 with phase 1 complete, you are in mid to late phase 2 or phase 3. Each position has one primary action. Phase 1. Complete the protection components. Phase 2. Reach $100,000 without interruption. Phase 3. Do not disrupt the engine. The complexity of wealth building is often overstated. The phases are simple. The sequence is non-negotiable. The man in marketing does not think of himself as someone who made particularly good financial decisions. He thinks of himself as someone who made one structural decision early, to finish phase 1 before expanding his lifestyle, and then did not stop doing the thing he started. He was not smarter than his counterpart. He was not more disciplined in any general sense. He followed a sequence, early enough for the compounding math to do the extraordinary work, and he did not interrupt it. At 50, with $1,140,000, he has options that his counterpart does not. He can reduce his hours. He can take the risk of a career change. He can fund his children's education without debt. He can retire at 58 if he chooses to, or work until 65 if he chooses that. The $1 million did not give him wealth in the abstract. It gave him choices in the concrete, the specific, practical ability to make decisions about the remaining decades of his life without being constrained by the monthly arithmetic of a balance sheet that requires full employment income to stay solvent. The man in logistics has $187,000. He has choices too. They are fewer and they cost more to exercise. The difference between the two men is not 26 years of dramatically different lives. It is 26 years of a sequence running in one case and not running in the other, producing, at the end, a difference in available freedom that no single year along the way would have predicted. The $1 million is not the point. The sequence is the point. The $1 million is just what the sequence produces, if you start it early enough and do not stop.